And then along with that is something that's also extremely important is how will my audience interact with the project, right? Is this at an event? So will your project, your sales experience be on a giant touchscreen? Will they interact primarily on a mobile device? If so, that's really going to help you understand where to spend your time when you're creating content in Studio. Or is it going to be linked in an email? So it'll probably be used on a desktop screen, something like that, right? So think about exactly how they're going to interact with it and where they're going to interact with it. Um, and then that can start to inform some of your design choices. Going back to the touchscreen example, right? So maybe you have a big event, you've got a project or a product launching or something, and you're at a convention or an event. It's probably not the best to then load your experience up with a lot of text, right? If you're at a booth with an experience, people are probably going to come in, they're going to touch a few things, maybe watch a video, look at some really good images, and then move on. No one is going to stop at your booth and just read a lot of text on your experience. So understanding how exactly they're going to interact with it will inform a lot of the design choices that you make. Like if they're at a booth, you're probably going to go talk to them. And so you don't want to have to compete with the experience if it's loaded up with text, right? Um, Same thing the other way around. Like maybe this is a process-based experience. Maybe you're changing a process that you do within your company, and there's step-by-step instructions or things like that that you have to portray or get across to your audience members. In that case, it might be a little more text heavy, so you can explain that stuff. But in that case, they're also probably viewing your experience while sitting on a computer. So that is a good opportunity to maybe have a little more content than something where they're going to look at it and then move on, right? So again, understanding how your audience will interact with your project is crucial. All right, moving on to, oops, I skipped one. Um, then the last thing, and this one's pretty obvious, but it's to understand the deadlines of your project and all of your potential blockers, right? So like I said, it might seem pretty straightforward, but a lot of times we need to understand exactly what the deadline is for a project so we can really determine what the scope of the project is going to be. Is this a really short turnaround time? Like, do you have a couple of days to work on something? If so, the way you approach the project might be a little bit different than if you have something that is maybe a month or two out, right? If it's like tomorrow, you could go to the asset library, pull in a bunch of assets, update them, and ship it off. But if you have more time, you can really think about it, go through your project analysis, and have a good idea of what you're trying to create. But that all is determined by understanding what your deadlines are, what potential blockers might be. Is it technology constraints? Will there be Wi-Fi at my event, right? Or maybe it's people. Maybe some people are very picky and they want, and you know they're going to want to give a ton of feedback throughout the project. So you need to consider that as you're putting it together, right? All right. So once you have your planning done and you have a very solid, firm project analysis complete, you know exactly who your audience is, what their knowledge is about your subject matter, where and how they're going to interact with it, and exactly when you need to have this done, you can now jump into the design or the creative process of it, right? And so I always like to start by getting really inspired or really, really excited about what I'm working on. So I would highly recommend to seek out inspiration, create a mood board, analyze examples, or really anything that you feel like gets your creative juices flowing. You should get charged up with inspiration before you go and jump into a project. So I will ask the chat, where do you go for inspiration when you're working on projects? Think about it for a second. And if you have any really good examples, post them because I'm actually quite curious. But as you're getting into a project and you maybe you've hit like a creative block or you're at a wall and you don't really know where to go, where what can you use? What can you interact with? Where can you look to find your inspiration? Charlotte says Pinterest. Tim says Pinterest as well, or Behance. Yes. Pinterest again, Dribble, Behance. Yeah, all great sites, right? I definitely use Behance quite a bit when I look through inspiration. Pinterest or similar brands. Google Images says Allison. Chat GPT. Nice. Adobe Stock, Behance, Event, and others. Ooh, events. Yeah, I usually like to look. Yeah, Adobe Stock, iStock. Yeah, really good places to kind of go because that's really good user-generated content on all of those platforms of people creating stuff similar or in the same vein as what you're working on, right? So I think those are all great answers. Oftentimes you go to one of those sites, you search, like maybe you're making a interactive presentation deck, you search presentation decks, right? And you can see some really good layouts, some really good uses of visuals and typography and color that can inform some of the design decisions you're going to make within your project. So I love all those. Thank you for sharing. Um, so I've said this a few times throughout different webinars and different courses and whatnot, but when you're feeling inspired, the worst thing that you could do is just let it go, right? This was a really cool site. This was a really cool example. Awesome. And then you just kind of forget, right? No, really use that inspiration and come up with something awesome about how you can apply it to your project. So when, let's say you find a really good example on Pinterest or Behance, instead of just saying, all right, that's awesome, take the time and really look at it and see how it can translate to your project. So things like what exactly it was about the example that you found inspiring. Like pinpoint exactly what it was. Was it the layout? Was it the use of topography? Maybe there's an interaction that it used that you really liked. Find exactly what it was that was inspiring. Don't just say, that's cool, but really take note on what it was. And when I say take note, I mean literally take notes. Write down in a journal, in a doc, somewhere why you found it inspiring and what about it was or that caught your eye in the beginning, right? And then, as I said, determine how it can translate to your project. Obviously, it's not going to be a one-to-one transfer. You can just look at the example and then recreate it in Studio. So you're going to have to think creatively of how it translates to your project, right? Was it a really cool header section on a wireframe or a mock-up? If so, how can you apply what you liked about it to your project? Or maybe it was a content block. Maybe there's like a really cool timeline or something like that, right? Can that be used in the project that you're working on that you're finding inspiration for in the beginning? If not, again, don't just let it go. Save it for later because that will be useful on a project somewhere down the line. So whether it's a mood board or it's a folder or something, maybe it's even bookmarks. Don't let those inspirational bits go, but always save them for later. Put them in your back pocket because a project down the road could benefit from them if it's not the project that you're currently working on. But all that to say is really take the time to analyze the example and really look at the inspiration, pinpoint exactly what you found about it to be inspiring, take note on it, and think about, strategize how that then translates to your project. I promise you, taking the extra time to do that is going to be far more beneficial for the project that you're working on than just saying something looks cool and then moving on, right? Because when we see something inspiring, we get excited. We get excited and we want to jump in and start creating something ourselves. But we can really harness that inspiration and focus it if we take the time to analyze it. Cool. All right. So let's say you're feeling inspired. You've got your project analysis done. You've gone through, you've made a mood board, you've made an inspiration board. I don't know, something. You're feeling really good. And now you've got your content. Maybe you've written all up the copy, or maybe you're translating the copy from a PDF or something like that. But you're ready to jump into the design phase in Studio and start to build, right? So again, before you just jump in and start building stuff, I highly recommend iteratively developing your project, beginning with a wireframe and iterating on it all the way up until you have a fully interactive published experience. Wireframes, we're going to get into them in just a second, but they are an awesome and crucial piece of the content creation process because you can rapidly start to lay out the information, see how the experience might look, have a good idea of how it's going to flow. But then, more importantly, if you have a lot of stakeholders involved in your project, you can send them the wireframes and get rapid feedback on the layout and whatnot without investing heavy amounts of time in the final project. I would hate for you to spend all this awesome time in a Ceros experience and then your stakeholders not like it or want something completely different, right? And then you got to go over and start completely over again and that's just going to use up a lot of the time, especially if you have a tight deadline. So I highly recommend starting with a wireframe, a low fidelity mock-up of your experience, and then iteratively building on it until you are to the point where you have a fully published experience. So I got this awesome experience itself that's all about the power of wireframing from sketch to experience. So this goes over, and I'll send this in the chat. Actually, I'll do that right now for your viewing pleasure. Boom, there you go. But we're going to go over some of the stuff in here. So to start with, once you have your content ready, identify the content that you want to have in the experience, right? So maybe you've written out a bunch of stuff, you've got a bunch of copy, maybe you've got some images that you want to use, and now you're ready to bring it to life. So the first thing to do, like I mentioned, is to create a low fidelity wireframe. This really helps you focus on the layout of the experience rather than building out the interactions, building out to the animations, all that type of stuff. You can start by just building a wireframe, then maybe like a mid fidelity and then a high fidelity mock-up, and then you can layer on the interactions and the animations and stuff like that. So some tips for that, be really fast with it. Don't spend too much time on your wireframe. The whole idea is to get an idea of the layout and to get feedback from your stakeholders. Maybe that's your manager, maybe that's your design team, maybe that's a customer even, right? But be quick with it. Don't spend too much time and just get their feedback on the general wireframe. Don't overload it with images and interactions. Like I said, just keep it super simple. The idea is to get an idea for the structure. Um, and then once you have your wireframe figured out, here's some key UX principles, kind of an overview of UX principles to ensure that the interactiveness of the experience is top notch. So the first one would be wayfinding, right? Think about how your users are going to navigate through the experience. Can they find what is relevant to them, explore the content, navigate back to the homepage, and stay oriented? Is it obvious where the buttons are, where the direction is, the navigation is, and where to go next? You don't want your experience to look like just a hodgepodge or someone dropped a jigsaw puzzle on the ground, right? It should be very obvious how to navigate through the site. Along with that is visual clarity. This is something that we've talked about a lot throughout various courses and webinars. But keeping it clean and keeping a visual hierarchy throughout the entire experience is going to help navigate the user's eye and get them to where you want them to go, right? So, as defined here, it says define a visual standard, right? Be consistent with your use of size, color, text, animations, and points of interaction with this within the experience. So, again, drawing back to maybe Intro to Design, a course that we teach, using that repetition, the design principle, to ensure everything is consistent. Your buttons all look like buttons and they all look the same. You're using similar fonts, colors. The placement of your navigation isn't jumping all over the place. Don't make your experience a guessing game, but more so make it an easy to use user experience that honestly your audience doesn't even think about, right? They shouldn't have to say, wow, that's a really cool navigation, or wow, where is that navigation? This is something that is so good that it almost doesn't even get recognized, right? That's how you know you're doing a good job. And then signifiers is very similar. So make sure your buttons are clearly buttons, but they're all cohesive with one another. Here on our bad example, you can see our previous button and our next button look different. And we don't want that. We want them to look the same and look like they belong together and make it obvious what each of them do. Same with hierarchy. Create that visual hierarchy that increases readability, usability, and draws the attention to where you want the users to go next, right? And then readability, again, make sure you have great color contrast with your text and your backgrounds and all your colors. Make sure that your fonts aren't too small. Make sure they're not too big, and make sure they're not too weird, but actually easy to read. Again, these are things like UX are things that your audience shouldn't even recognize. They should be so good and so simple that it's not apparent to them. Okay. And then same thing with control. Like this is a big one, but you need to think about how much control you want your users to have as they're going through this presentation. Is there or this experience, sorry, is there a linear line that they need to follow? For example, step-by-step instructions or a presentation that builds upon each other. Or is this more of a microsite where they can kind of jump around, look where they want, find the information that's relevant to them, and just go about it however they want, right? Those are two very different ways of approaching an experience, but both of them are valid. And that's something that you'll determine as a part of your project analysis, like we talked about. So, depending on how much freedom you want to give your users, that'll determine how you want to set up your navigation or the control of the site. If they can jump around, it's probably important to have some sort of table of contents or maybe a drop-down menu where they can go from page to page. If it's a linear process, maybe it's just back and forth buttons, right? Previous to next. But you need to think about exactly how you want them to interact with it, what the flow should be of the site, and if there even is a systematic flow with it. So those are just some UX principles to keep in mind. I know I blazed over those, but they are in the experience that I shared with you. So feel free to look through them um, as you start working on your next project. And then, most importantly, when it comes to Saros, is find moments for interactivity, right? Saros is so powerful in the ability to let you create interactive content without having to code anything. It can really separate itself from other things like PowerPoint presentations or just straight up uh, PDF files or anything like that. So you can use all sorts of interactive elements in your experience to increase the engagement, but using them thoughtfully is the main thing, right? We don't want to just overload it with a bunch of interactions and make it tedious to use, but you need to find opportunities to make them meaningful. So this is not by any means a comprehensive list, but think of things like bullets and lists. Is your experience going to have a lot of images? What about data viz, right? Is there a key theme across the whole experience? Maybe you need to include some sort of map or step-by-step instructions. Within this experience, you can click on it, and we've got some really cool examples created by users and the Saros team for each of these things, right? So this is one that is step by step. Again, this is a very linear. You see, we've got the progress bar here at the bottom, big navigation buttons on the side to go through each of these steps. Um, let's go to another one. How about images? So this one uses a big full width image carousel with awesome transitions and an auto timing, auto looping carousel behind it, right? So these images are very powerful. They're very evoking of emotion and really portrays what they're trying to get across with the experience. So stack related images, shorten scroll depth by stacking images and copy on top of each other. So what that's basically saying is instead of having all these images lined up on top of each other or stacked, which would require a lot of scrolling up and down, you're saving a lot of room. You're increasing that visual clarity by putting them all in a carousel. And having it on this auto timer keeps the user's engagement, right? If they were just kind of stacked up statically on the page, they'd scroll up and down, they really wouldn't spend a whole lot of time looking at them. But every time this animation plays, it almost re-engages the user's eye and they feel more inclined to read through the captions along with it and take a closer look at the image. So just a really good use of image carousels. Again, the idea here is to save space in your experience, but also to keep the user engaged. So there's a lot of other really good examples in here. I highly recommend looking through them yourself. And then also, as you start working on your next project, think about these types of things. Are there images that I need to use? What about facts and data viz, right? How can I then make them interactive? Look at these really good examples and you'll be off to a great start. All right. So here's like a good like overview example of what we just talked about. So this is a static document, right? I don't even think this was a PDF. This might have easily just been a Google Doc, but this is a static document with kind of not great layout, right? We talked about developing that visual hierarchy and guiding the user's eye through the experience, but how this document is laid out, it kind of lacks all of that, right? The images are different sizes. They're kind of just placed there. This is obviously in two columns, but where does my eye, or where's my eye supposed to go after the big header here, right? Do I jump down here and then do I skip over here, or do I go straight down here and then here? It's hard to say because this doesn't really have a visual hierarchy. So my green header competes with the header of the same size but in black font, and then my header two is down here. So I almost overlook all of this information here on the side. Like my eyes went from the tomato picking to here, to here, here, and here. I almost didn't even realize this was on the page, right? Similarly, on this page, I went here first because it's the big image, and then I read it backwards. So I got to testimonials very last, even though they are first on the page. So there isn't a clear visual hierarchy on this document, and it needed a lot of work, and it could really benefit from interactivity to make it far more engaging. The content in there is great, it really is, but the layout is not. So going from this document, we then went to a low fidelity wireframe. As you can see, not a crazy amount of thought and time, I should say not a crazy amount of time, but definitely a lot of thought went into the wireframe. So already you can see that this is bigger, this is bolder, and this has far more visual impact than the static PDF or document that we were looking at before. From that to that, right? Once the wireframe was complete, get some stakeholder input on it, iterate on the wireframe a few times, get in a really good spot. Then this is the final interactive experience. So we have this awesome, big, vibrant, and green header section. You scroll down, great animations, great anti-alignment here with this offset image here, with these animations keeping little bits of information, coming down a full color, full width background on the mission statement to really draw your eyes towards it. You can see the text here. Some of the key words are highlighted in a brighter green. It's still legible. It's still easy to read, but your eyes are then drawn to thriving garden, eco education, sustainable future, right? And then notice how, as I scroll through this, each of my abstract little shapes here are bleeding onto the next content block. So as I get here, I'm already looking at this, which is then pulling me down to the next section, right? So it's almost leading me along or wayfinding me through this first page of the experience. Here's this, again, a big container, highlights the text, and it makes it stand out quite a bit more than was in the PDF version. We get down here, look how large that text is, right? Like that is massive. Lots of bright and vibrant colors here, draws the eyes, but none of this feels overdone. It doesn't feel like it's too much. It doesn't hurt my eyes, but it feels very cohesive with the colors, with the shapes, the border radiuses, and everything, right? Really good data viz here. Go back up. Great experience that came all the way from this. So the content in these two is exactly the same. But with Saros and with a proper wireframe, they were able to create something that was far better, far more engaging, and easier to consume and better to consume for the users than just a standard document like that. Cool. So just a really fun example. Like I said, you have the link in the chat. So I highly recommend going through this as you get into your next project to really understand how you can maximize your content creation process. All right. So this is an important matter, though. Saros does not replace your design process. It enhances it. I hear this a lot, actually, and I can understand why, but I'm here to course correct if you have this misunderstanding that when you start using Saros, the idea isn't to completely replace your design flow, right? We don't want you to just drop Illustrator or drop Photoshop or Figma or whatever other design tool that you use. The whole idea of Saros is to bring those assets, those graphics, those wireframes to life, make published interactive experiences that you can then send through emails in your CRM, or maybe you're going to embed them on your CMS, your LMS, or whatever, right? Saros bridges the gap between your designs and the live content and adds that layer of interactivity and the analytics behind it to track the performance. So we've talked a lot about wireframing the last little while. I don't even wireframe my experiences in Saros. I think Figma is a far better wireframing platform, but Saros is a substantially better interactive content creation platform. So I use them all together. When I'm creating stuff, I normally develop my assets, if it's visuals or whatnot, in the Adobe products such as Illustrator or Photoshop. I write all of my copy in Google Docs, and then I wireframe and make even up to high fidelity wireframes and prototypes in Figma. And then almost like the last step of my design process, is to take everything that I have built in these other platforms and put them all together in Saros. So in many cases, I'm not touching Saros until I get towards the end of the design process. Once my experience is finished, I publish it and then I put it wherever it needs to go. So I actually, a few months ago, wrote a little article about just that, about using Studio with Figma Illustrator and your design workflow. It's a good read because I wrote it, but I will put it in the chat so you can have that one as well. I don't know if it's actually a good read, but it has a lot of really good information about what I just talked about. Using Saros in your design flow rather than replacing your design flow with it. So that is also in the chat. You get two goodies today, two hyperlinks. So take a look if you've got the time. But again, the main thing here is that it's not a matter of replacing your existing design flow with Saros, but enhancing it, building upon it with the power that it brings with interactive content creation. Cool. So then the very last step of all of this is to scale, right? You've gone through the whole journey of getting your project, panicking about the project and the deadline, and then you jump into the project analysis. You understand your audience, you understand how they're going to interact with it, the steps that you should take. You feel inspired, you've done your discovery, right? Um, and then you went through the whole design process. You wrote your copy, you made your wireframes, you put it in Xeros, you published it, you saved the day, and everyone is extremely, extremely happy. So now what, right? Don't just have it be a one-off, but use the templates function within Saros or even the asset library to build faster for next time. Maybe you've built a really cool tab module, or maybe you've built a really cool header section. Instead of having to recreate that over and over again, or even opening one experience, copying it, and pasting in the other one, you can simply save these things in the asset library or in the template section, and you can just drag and drop with ease for your next project. So, for example, this is a early version of an experience that I've been working on. So to give you some context, we're building a new product certification program in the Saros Educate team, right? And the first course of the certification program is called Studio Tour, and it gives users a wide sweeping look at how to use Studio, how to create content in there before they get into more specific things. And so this is like an about the course type of page. As you can see, I've got a pinned UI of the studio here as a really nice graphic. So everything kind of flows above it. I've got some content sections, a little prototype of what the badge might look like here, and then another CTA down at the bottom, right? It's a pretty straightforward experience, but a lot of thought went into how I have this graphic here be pinned and have this gradient sort of like full over to give it that pseudo parallax effect. Um, this is probably going to go through a few more iterations, but let's say that I really like this iteration, right? And I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to use. There's like 9 more courses in the certification program that we're currently building. And so instead of just rebuilding this over and over again, I could just save this one as a template and then update the text for all the next courses. That way, all of these pages look cohesive and they look like standardized across each of the courses. And I'll also point out like the buttons here, like those I just pulled straight out of our asset library. We have a team library that Alex, our multimedia designer on the Saros Educate team, has put together. We have all of our static tiles, our interactive tiles, background elements, everything in here pulled from various experiences created by various people on the Saros team, all aggregated. So I could easily just come to my button section, and here it is. See the register now button? I just grabbed that and I dragged it onto the page, and there it is. So that saved me a ton of time as I was building this because I didn't have to go through the tedious steps of building a button with its hover states and all that type of stuff. So again, just an easy way to scale your content creation. But as I was saying, maybe I want to just templatize this. I would just go to the studio admin. I would find the page. Here it is. And from the drop-down menu, I would go to manage and then create template. And I would just push create. It thinks about it for a second, and then I can fill out all of the template stuff. I can put it where I want to put it, and then I save it. I'll just put it here, and I'll save it. And then boom, I can now go to my Saros admin, and this template is here forever. I push view template. I can see exactly what it looks like. Great. And then I can come here. I can manage the template. I can add to our showcase, but then I'll also use template. Maybe it's about this, about say course two, right? Cool. I can select the folder I want to put it in. Maybe it's just 2025 webinars. Sorry, Liana, that I'm screwing up your folders. And then I push experience or create or open experience. Then boom, I have a different version. Here's this one about this course template, and then about course two. I can now come in here. I can just edit this, call it whatever I want. Course two, right? I'm off to the races. So that's an easy way, as I was saying, to scale all of the hard work that you've put into the experiences that you've created. The asset library is awesome. We use it across our team. We use it across multiple teams at Saros. Our marketing team, our creative team, and the educate team all steal components and assets from each other to ensure that we have brand consistency across all of our customer-facing experiences. But then the templatize or the templating ability is awesome. Kelsey, our LX designer, and Pat, our video producer on our team, are the ones who are actually creating the courses. And so they can then go and use that template that I just created, update it per course, and put it in our LMS or CMS, and then we're off to the races without me having to be involved at all. That's just scaling across the entire team. So there we go. That is everything that I wanted to cover today. We talked about scaling finished projects. We talked about the design phase and wireframing. We talked about finding inspiration, and then we talked about running a project analysis or the planning phase of the content creation process. So this is everything that we did. And I highly recommend looking at the resources or the links that I added within the chat. They'll help you along your way. But take what we've talked about today, take what you've learned, your little nuggets of information, and reflect on how you can apply them to your content creation process to increase it, to make it more focused, to streamline it, and most importantly, to scale it. Cool. All right. That's all I've got. Is there any questions before we wrap things up? Wondering if designers use Saros to build their online portfolios. I think you certainly could. I think that's a great use case. Rich, it looks like Leona sent the other link. Cool. All right. Well, if there's no questions, I hope everybody has the best Thursday. Oh, Charlotte with the buzzer beater. When do you know you're finished with the analysis phase? That is a really, really good question. I would say going through these questions, right? If you have a firm grasp on all of these and starting here, sometimes people will start with deadlines and blockers. Like, okay, what is the deadline, right? I put this very last, but you could easily start with that. But I typically like to ask all of these questions. And if I feel informed on all of this, I have a really firm understanding of my user and of the timelines for the project, that's when I'm done. That's what I would say. I mean, because you could go on and on and on, and you could refine and you could refine, but at some point, you're going to have just a firm grasp and be like, okay, we're in a good spot. As I'm iterating, right, through both the content creation phase and the wireframing phase, I might discover more, or I might discover maybe some of the things I identified aren't fully accurate or fully spot on. That's when you can change things up, you can pivot on the fly, and that's again going back to why wireframes are important. Charlotte, I would hate for you to get like 2 hours into building a fully interactive experience and then be like, oops, I didn't consider something with my users, and now everything that I've created has to be updated. But making sure that you use a wireframe beforehand helps you pivot that pretty quick. So, long answer short, I like to answer all of these questions to myself, write them all down, and then at that point, I feel like I've got a pretty good analysis that can get me started. It might change, it might wiggle a little bit as I go through it, but answering those questions is where I like to start. That's a great question. Any other questions? All right, do me a favor and don't go run on the treadmill today so you can walk better than I can walk. I'm currently upstairs and going downstairs is terrible. I have to walk I have to walk backwards down the stairs because my calves are so tight. So don't go running today. You have my permission to say no to running. All right? Do something more fun. Do something far more fun than running today. All right. You know what? Go eat some sushi. I think everyone can eat sushi. Whether you're vegetarian, you're vegan, or you eat everything like me, anyone can benefit from sushi. So everyone, go get sushi. Don't go on a run. And I will see you in the next webinar. Goodbye.